Everybody, I'm Peter Lindstrom, Chair of the Environment Committee, and I will call the meeting to order. We've got an exciting agenda today, which first up, without objection, we can move forward on this agenda. And the first item is the approval of the meeting minutes from October 10th. Any changes to those meeting minutes? Or is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. That takes us to our non-consent business agenda, where we have one item in 2023-248 Seneca Polymer Contract 22P297. Welcome. Come on down. All right. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Joe Ward, and I'm the Assistant Manager for Process Engineering, Research Development, and Air Quality. And I'm here today to talk to you about a polymer contract for the Seneca plant. And you'll notice I'm not Rebecca. Rebecca had a baby boy over the weekend, so that's great news.
It's exciting.
Yeah, so I'll do my best to follow in her footsteps here. So first off, is there a way to advance the slide? Oh, whoops. Thank you. There we go. Okay. All right. So our sludge at the Seneca plant is made up of both primary sludge and secondary sludge. And our primary sludge is the particles that naturally settle in the primary tanks. And then our secondary sludge are the excess microorganisms from the aeration process. Our polymer is made of mineral oil, polyacrylamide, and water, and it causes our sludge polymers to agglomerate, and it allows our dewatering equipment to be able to thicken it or dewater it. You can kind of see in the lower picture there that the sludge is sort of clumping together. And at different plants, we need different types of polymer. For instance, a few weeks ago, we were here talking about Empire Polymer, and that's different equipment, it's different sludge, they receive different waste. So then Seneca, so they have different equipment, and they end up with a different type. Our polymers at Seneca are used in gravity belt thickeners and centrifuges. The gravity belt thickeners take our secondary sludge, and it increases the solids concentration from about 1% to about 6 or 7%, which is then mixed with primary sludge and co-fed to the centrifuges. And the centrifuges take the sludge and they dewater it to more of a spongy type material, and that's about 25% solids. And that allows it to be fed into the incinerators there, which then can be burned and the ash disposed of at a landfill. So the background on our procurement process here was it was a two-step process. We first issue an invitation for pre-qualification, and as part of the pre-qualification process, we go through a full-scale evaluation. In this case, we tested 8 different polymers at the plant to see what worked the best. And after pre-qualifying the different polymers, we ended up with 4 that worked well enough, that met our requirements. And we issued an invitation for bids, and we received 1 bid and opened it on September 28th. And that bid was from Polydyne, who met the evaluation process requirements for 3 of the 4 products. And the lowest cost product is selected for the contract. We're estimated at a $1,210,000 annual expenditure with a 5-year contract not to exceed $7,048,000. And there's some escalation in there for inflation. It's the difference in the years. And our Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity did not set an MCUB goal for this contract. The proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to award and execute contract 22P248A with Polydyne Inc. to provide polymer to the Seneca wastewater treatment plant in an amount not to exceed $7,048,000. Oops. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Ward, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've already seen this as part of the management committee, but I just had another question. Is only one vendor bid was received? Was that because the other ones technically failed and didn't pass, or other people just decided not to bid? I'm just curious,
Mr. Chair and committee members, so in that case, so we had 3 vendors and 4 products that qualified. One vendor had 3 products and all 3 of them failed.
Okay.
And by fail, I mean it didn't dewater the sludge enough to the level that we needed it to feed it to the incinerator. And in the other case, it was Ecolab was the competitor, but they decided not to bid, and we don't necessarily know why. They did not let us know why.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Following up on that, are we sure we got a decent price? I mean, is it what we expected, or?
Mr. Chair and committee members, it is the exact same price that we currently have. And so it's sort of what we expected.
Okay.
And we've worked with this group, with Polydyne, quite a bit, correct?
That's correct. They're the sort of the dominant player in the polymer supply industry for the municipal market.
Great. Other questions? Is there a motion to move forward?
Move approval.
Second. Second. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that takes us to our information item. It's about water.
Sure is.
I love it.
Hello, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Jen Kostrzewski. I'm the Assistant Manager of Water Policy and Planning with the Water Resources Planning Section of Environmental Services.
And I am Lanya Ross. I'm an environmental analyst in water resources focusing on water supply planning.
I am both happy and sad to inform you that this is the last research presentation that we will be working with. So if you have any questions, now's your time to add. No, I'm just kidding. We will continue. We will continue this conversation, but instead of focusing on the research, hopefully you have learned some interesting water facts, especially issues for our region. And with that information, we will be shifting into the next phase, which is discussing policy and crafting policy with you all. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that this is going to be the last chance to ask Lanya all those really hard questions that you are holding for all of us. And so with that, we'll begin. For today's presentation, we are going to be covering 2 major areas. There will be the standard planning overview. Lanya will be sharing about the paper that she led with her team for protecting source waters within the region. And then we're going to wrap it up with some water policy summaries and finding some way to frame all of the different topic areas that we have shared with you into a framework to move forward, hopefully with policy implications. It's a good old slide. I just can't not share this. The water policy plan is part of the regional development guide, and it focuses on ensuring sustainable water resources for the region. This is the opportunity for the council to really frame how integrative water planning works for us and how we can work with our partners in the region to really have a holistic plan for our waters. Within it, there will be policies, strategies, and actions, for both the council and then also just so that we have alignment in our planning, requirements for our local water plans, for our local sewer plans, or local water supply plans, and our local surface water management plans. These policies will commit the council to take action in the areas of long-range visioning and planning, regional system investments, facility management, technical assistance, research and assessment, and then our partnerships. This is the timeline, and it still has not changed since the last time I have shared this with you, other than the end is near, the end is closer. And so the end goal that we are really focusing on is that adoption by the end of 2024. And that's the full plan package that you have heard about in the Committee of the Whole and all of the other various policy plans. The other date that is pretty important to us as the staff who are helping you work with these policies is the public comment period, because that means if you step back in time, we're gonna have to have the draft ready before the summer, or so like in between spring and early summer is where we really need to work on having a finalized draft, which means we have from now until then to have really good conversation and develop policies that can go into that plan. We have shared 5 previous water topics with you all. This is just a reminder that it was reuse, water and climate, rural water concerns, wastewater planning and service considerations, and water quality. And Lanya's gonna bring us home with this last paper of protecting source water areas.
Excellent. Thank you, Jen. And I apologize, this is late in the evening, it's gray, so I know energy levels are a little bit low. I'm gonna try to keep my energy up, but feel free to I gave Jen permission to nudge me if I start to get a little boring. I'm gonna try and use the mouse, so bear with me here at some point.
How could anybody be bored talking about duismas?
And we are today.
Yes.
All right. So protecting source water areas is very, very critical to our water resources in the region. It also has a very strong tie to land use. So there's a lot of water-related policy in the water policy plan, but this is also information that we're sharing with some of our colleagues across the council. It may have some implications for some of the other policy work we're doing as well. Today, we're really focused on the water policy plan. But as we think about what this encompasses and the importance of it, I do want to set the stage with the sort of many different elements of the region's water supplies. There's a lot of different interconnected parts, from the precipitation, that is kind of the ultimate source of water, to the landscape that it moves across as it goes into the rivers, the lakes, and the aquifers that the water supply sources that we're drawing from with all of our local water supply infrastructure, which then brings that water to a very diverse range of users across the region, who then use it and discharge it into our wastewater system, where it's reclaimed, put back into the environment, and this cycle begins again. And so this paper is focusing, nope, it's not gonna work, on the source water areas, that landscape that the water, our precipitation is moving through, and how that landscape affects the quality and the quantity of the water that goes into our sources. And so when you think about where that is in this cycle, what we do to protect those source areas has downstream implications on a vast natural and built infrastructure investments in our region. So protecting source water areas is a really important part of the work that we can do. Kind of reiterate, we do have some technical definitions of source waters. We have a strong partnership with the Minnesota Department of Health in this area. They have a responsibility for source water protection as well. And so when we talk about source water, we are referring to the origins of water from the streams, rivers, lakes, aquifers, and particularly thinking about those sources that are providing drinking water to our public water supplies and private wells. You know, we treat to drinking water standards, and we use it for many other purposes in addition. Source water protection are the community efforts to prevent water pollution before it can reach those drinking water sources and become a public and an economic problem. So there's a really strong tie to drinking water. Again, I want to stress that this connects to a lot of economic benefit as well.
Question? Mr. Chair?
Yeah, please.
Could you explain on the figure the gray areas? I couldn't quite understand.
Yes, please. So this map is in the Protecting Source Waters research paper, so you can see a larger version. But this is identifying the different water sources for communities in the Twin Cities metropolitan area. So communities who are using groundwater sources through public water supply systems are in blue. Those communities who are using surface water in public water supply systems are in green. Those that are using a blend of groundwater and surface water are in yellow. And the communities in gray are those communities without a municipal public water supply system. And so they are using groundwater, but it is through thousands of private wells.
Okay, I think the text was cut off, so I couldn't see.
Yeah, that's fair.
Thank you.
But to really kind of drive home the complexity of the water supply system, and when we say protecting water supply sources, it's a very diverse set of sources that we are focusing on. So we tap into a lot of technical information, but when we think about how most residents experience their concerns about their source waters and their drinking water supplies, it's through our own lived experience and stories shared by people who are drinking the water every day and reading the news. So these are some of the headlines that are shaping local concerns about source waters. So that's framing why we took on this research paper. As in all of the research papers, we have an issue statement. And when in terms of protecting source waters, we are working to ensure safe, sustainable, sufficient drinking water for the region by partnering with public water suppliers, land use planners and developers, watershed management organizations, business owners and managers, residents, and others, with the goal of improving our understanding and the collaboration among those groups in order to protect the land areas that serve as the sources for our region's water supply. And this work is particularly important where source water protection areas extend beyond one community into their neighbors' jurisdictional boundaries. There's a lot of overlap in our water supply sources. Adequate and proactive protection will prevent threats to water supplies from becoming a public health problem and an economic problem. Our role in protecting source water areas is shaped by both the council's role in regional planning and some specific statutory expectations for water supply planning. And so the language is included here, both for regional water planning and the statute that directs the council's water supply planning. And so, for the rest of the slides, I'm going to go through what we've identified as some of the crucial concerns when thinking about how to protect source water areas, and then some of our policy recommendations. The first crucial concern that we wanted to talk about, surprise, surprise, is climate. As I had mentioned earlier, the ultimate source of our water is precipitation, which here in Minnesota varies from season to season and from year to year. And we are known for that. We take that into consideration in a lot of our water planning. But climate change may be changing the amount of precipitation that we're seeing and when we're getting it. So changes in growing season have implications for how much water we're using, irrigation on our crops. It also has implications for how much recharge, when rain falls, how much is being used by plants versus how much is allowed to infiltrate our aquifers and recharge our aquifers. So there's some long-term potential changes there. We may be seeing warmer winters, which has implications for our winter snowpack. So if we get a warm winter and all of that snow melts while soils are frozen, it is running off into our rivers and downstream instead of seeping into the ground during that March snow melt. And so there may be some changes for recharge that way. We also expect to see some wet and dry periods, some of them over multiple years, so a decade that is wetter than normal, and so we see rising water tables causing issues. We also see we're in year 3 of a drought, and so the implications for water demand and recharge at that scale as well. In addition to heat waves, people running their air conditioning, watering their lawns during a heat wave in the summer. So there's a lot of water supply implications related to that, in addition to some water quality changes. Another concern that this paper raises is the sensitivity of our near-surface sediments and the underlying bedrock to potential contamination. I'm a trained geologist, so I have to include some of the geologic-related maps. But to reach our surface water intakes in our wells, our rain and snowmelt is moving across the landscape and infiltrating down below the plant root depth into the soils and rock below. And when this water is picking up different contaminants, pollutants are carried along into those water sources. And some parts of our region are more susceptible to infiltration and potential contamination than others. You see here the darker green on the southeast part of the metropolitan area is where we have geologic units, aquifers that have karst development in them. There's a lot of sinkholes. Contamination can move very quickly in unexpected directions in that part of the metropolitan area. You also have very sandy soils in Dakota County, and so water can get into the ground relatively easily there, as opposed to Carver County, where we have very thick clay soils, and so they struggle with infiltrating stormwater. So there's different challenges, both with quantity and quality in different parts of the metropolitan area. Something important to keep in mind when we think about the need to protect and what best management practices to use in different parts of the metro. Another concern that we have is the challenge of land management and source water protection implementation when we have overlapping jurisdictions. There's different authorities, responsibilities, and also many opportunities for partnership. This is a map of the groundwater, drinking water supply management areas, or DWSMAs, in the 7-county metropolitan area in blue. And where one community's DWSMA overlaps another, you see the darker blue. So those darker blue areas are contributing groundwater to multiple communities and relatively higher populations. And challenges arise when one community may say, this area is not vulnerable. Our well is not vulnerable to contamination in this area. But another community says, for us, this area is very vulnerable for our well. So who's in charge of that property management and making best management recommendations? And do they agree or do they conflict? So there's some questions being raised like that. There's a group in the West Metro who are working together on drinking water supply protection planning right now to try and resolve some of those discrepancies. Another concern is with our land cover and our land use, because our different land use categories are associated with different potential contaminants. And so you see a map here of generalized land use across the Twin Cities metropolitan area. The DWSMAs are highlighted, they're sort of brighter colors. But when we think about the land uses in these drinking water supply management areas, the 3 largest uses are single-family detached, which is associated with potential contaminants like septic systems, storage tanks, and wells, which can provide pathways for contamination to move unless they are maintained and well constructed. Agricultural use is the 2nd largest land use in our drinking water supply management areas, and so we have potential contaminants like fertilizers, pesticide use, storage tanks. And you can see that the green area, kind of in the largest blob in southeastern metro area, that is the drinking water supply management area for the city of Hastings, and it's very agricultural. We also have a lot of undeveloped land in our drinking water supply management areas. There are some potential contaminants associated with that land, like wells, stormwater runoff, It's also an important opportunity because that land is going to be developed, and our choice about what we develop that into has implications for our water supply sources. And finally, I think kind of an obvious concern with drinking water supply and source water protection areas are examples of known source water contamination. We do have nitrate in our groundwater in this metropolitan area, and the sensitivity of the landscape to potential contamination affects where that occurs. There's also leaks and spills happening across our Twin Cities metropolitan area. We have other contamination sites, landfills, brownfields, and so programs to be monitoring and cleaning up those sites are very important in our drinking water supply management areas in particular. PFAS is in the news. And then we also have naturally occurring elements because all the rest of it wasn't enough. We also are struggling with arsenic, manganese, radium, and some other naturally occurring contaminants. And I just want to end with one of the important concerns related to protecting source water areas is the cost. On the flip side, the benefit of investing in protecting these areas. Some of the most well-known contamination sites in the region, the Twin Cities Army Ammunition Plant in Arden Hills, 3M in the East Metro, Riley Tar and Chemical Corporation in St. Louis Park are just some well-known examples, have taken decades and billions of dollars to address, to protect public health. And the community decisions that supported those businesses being there in the first place were made because this was a good investment in our economy, in jobs, in our communities. But they were made before the Met Council was established as a long-range planning agency in '67. They were made before, well before Minnesota adopted our wellhead protection rule in 1997. Community planners at the time did not have the range of information that I just shared with you. They didn't have the same understanding of where in our landscape was our water supply the most vulnerable. And they did not have the planning expectation to be looking ahead 30 or more years to set up some protections in place. There were some really phenomenal local examples of that, but it was people who had the resources and the time to be able to do that. We have this information, and we have this responsibility to help our communities and the businesses in them make good choices about land use, about water resource management that protects public health and protects business health. There's a huge liability associated with contaminating our groundwater supplies. And so going forward, I think this is a tough topic to wrestle with, but it's really important to think about what regional policies should be in place to support a region-wide evaluation of the value of source water protection and the costs of not protecting our source waters, so that we can really think about identifying and supporting opportunities to reduce risk. So we have some examples on this slide of some of the planning efforts that can inform and be informed by a region-wide evaluation of costs and benefits of source water protection. So some information to think about. Which brings us into policy. We have several current policies in the 2040 Water Resources Policy Plan that do relate to protecting source water areas. And so, there's a lot of complexity and interaction in a lot of the water work that we do at the council and in the region that protects source water. However, it's not very explicit in our current Water Resources Policy Plan. And so we do have this water research paper does put forth some new policy recommendations and some suggestions to perhaps revise existing policy to better protect source water areas. One of them is in the area of collaboration and partnership. And this would be a possible new policy to constructively engage across the boundaries of public agencies, the different levels of government, private and civic spheres, to carry out more integrated water resource management activities that are challenging to accomplish. And so this could include the council supporting more cross-community collaboration among public water suppliers in their communities, participating on more regional outreach and engagement because these protection activities span multiple communities. Those would be some examples of actions that our policy could do better supporting. This paper also proposes new policy specifically focused on integrated water planning. For example, the council working with partners to develop and support long-range water resource planning, addressing watershed water supply and wastewater needs, because the protection of our source water areas relies so much on our watershed protections, and it has really big implications for downstream infrastructure and downstream planning. In some cases, we do have existing policy that is important but could be revised to perhaps improve clarity and focus. The water reuse policy might be one example of this. It might include adding approaches to protect source water quality and reduce risk to the region's water supplies as we think about some of our long-range regional investments in reuse. What areas might we want to focus on? What areas might we require some additional technologies or treatments? We don't want to be infiltrating contaminated water in vulnerable drinking water supply management areas, although making sure that we're managing our surface waters in ways where we're protecting those quality as well. So there's some trade-offs. In some areas we might want to be extra careful. We have some new actions, perhaps, that could be added to the existing policy on wastewater sustainability. You had mentioned this earlier. Across its multiple divisions, the council is responsible for some significant facilities and land holdings, and these assets should be managed in ways that protect our source waters. Some of those might be environmental services facilities, but we also have properties in our transportation system and in parks, and so making sure that we are managing our land and helping our partners manage land in ways that protect source waters. We also might look at our existing investment policy and include some additional actions. One example that was proposed was describing the process to determine regional benefits, particularly important for source water protection investments, with the desired result of transparent and credible decision-making processes for Met Council ES investments. When we talk about investing in ways that provide regional benefits, being really clear about what those regional benefits are and source water protection should be included in that. A new policy was proposed in this paper on protecting regional water resources. And this might simply include redefining our current policy on assessing and protecting regional water resources into two separate policies so that we're really being clear about what resources are we committing to protection work and what resources are we committing to assessment work, identifying areas where we might be having issues, monitoring our progress. And so that's a suggestion that came out of this policy research paper. And this is the same thing, but just the flip side. And so with that, give you a moment to digest. And then I'm interested in, within the constraints of thinking about protecting our source waters, as I was sharing some of this, were there any crucial concerns that we missed? Are we overemphasizing? And as you think about the potential policy areas, did any stand out, or again, more important than the others, anything missing?
Committee? Hi.
So I had one thought that came to mind. It was kind of prompted by the nitrates map that you had put up about source water contamination examples around the region. And one of the things I was wondering, what risks, I guess it was prompted by this, but maybe not be directly relevant. What are the development risks? So if you think about like the ammunition site, so we're looking at a major redevelopment area for that with all sorts of multi-use sites. We're looking at commercial, residential. How could we use this policy to make sure that those developments are also what we're protecting source water when we talk about those kinds of major developments, that the council also plays a role in?
Mr. Chair, council member. I'm actually going to also tap Jen on this one. I think understanding where the landscape is more vulnerable or more sensitive is an important piece to bring into any discussions we have about development, particularly as we start to think about what best management practices might we be encouraging in certain areas. A lot of the watershed best management practices are really particularly valuable with developments. I think it's a little easier if there's like maybe let's not cite a massive chemical industrial site in a highly vulnerable drinking water supply management area. That's an easy one. But when it comes to a lot of sort of more typical development, it's not a yes, no, we do that land use type or not. It's more about what kinds of best practices, land use patterns do we want to encourage? And so.
Yeah, 2 weeks, when did we, 2 weeks ago, I think we came to the committee of the whole. I apologize, my time memory is not that great, but, and we shared a lot of the results from our scenarios, and I hope that one of the messages that the council as a whole took on is that as we are placing development, when we are thinking about water quality and whether that water runs off and infiltrates into a source water recharge area, we are gonna have trade-offs. So that nitrate map, if we develop some of those areas that are currently in agricultural production, we might lower the risk of nitrate to those specific areas, but we might elevate the risk for a different contaminant. And so I think this is where it is, we have really good structures within our metro area, specifically within city watershed, DWISMA protections to try and maintain smart development that has minimal impact on our waters. But it's just another opportunity for us to remind everyone along the way that some of our current decisions and where our desires might lie for economic benefit or housing impact, there could be some unintended consequences to our water resources as we're making those choices.
And to add on to that, this question led to sort of the impetus to split and really focus on investing in protection activities, so having a policy to protect and a policy to assess, to really lean into what are the technical assistance tools that we develop at the council, what kind of resources and programs do we want to support in our partners, and when it comes to the assessing side of things, are we putting out consistent information? Do we all have a shared understanding of, in this location, this is vulnerable, this is not vulnerable? Because there is, depending on what information you're using, it's vulnerable for that, but it's not vulnerable for this. Can we be more clear about, let's be consistent. This is a spot we want to prioritize. So if we can develop some resources to help make that clearer to everybody, I think that is also something that adds value to the region.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You talked about the beginning of wellhead protection. I could not remember when that started, so thank you for educating us. But it's been going on for a while now. I know the requirements have been changing over time, but is it making a difference? Or is it working?
That's a good question. I will call up the Department of
Phone a friend.
What you're seeing here are the 52 wheels in my head spinning. Because in many ways, it is helping. So we have, in the metropolitan area, all the large municipal water suppliers now have identified where are the priority areas that are contributing water to their wells, which we did not know before. And so that is information that we have. We have a better understanding of the vulnerability. And we have communities committing to programs like well sealing programs. There's a great program in Eden Prairie, for example, when building inspectors go out to a site, and if they see a well, they know to let the property owner know, are you aware of this well? If you're not using it anymore, let's seal it, and there are some grant opportunities for that. So resources are being leveraged to reduce risk. So in that sense, yes, this has been successful. We are constantly developing, and our land use is changing, and so this is an ever-going, ongoing challenge. People sell a property and may not know if the well is there or not, or pay attention to it. So there's a need for ongoing programs, and the Department of Health has a series of grants. I think we've heard from communities that they still need more resources. So there's still a need that has been expressed by our communities to support the implementation of wellhead protection plans. And I think that the council is well-suited to be a resource here because of our strong role in land use planning and comprehensive planning in particular. So helping to provide more education about what are the risks and the benefits of source water protection, and that technical assistance. That was not a strong yes/no answer, I apologize.
I had a similar thought about the wellheads, and do we also have a good understanding of how many of those wells are not being used at all? You kind of referenced that, like the homeowner that sells their property and then the new person may or may not have a good understanding of that. It may have been abandoned a long, long time ago. Basically, and what I'm thinking here is, you mentioned that there's some Department of Health grants and that Eden Prairie has a great program. Wouldn't it be amazing if we had our own grant program, that we got $5 million, $10 million from the legislature to implement a well sealing program in the metropolitan area? And just thinking about how you can either lead with the carrot or the stick. And the carrot is way better when you can say, here, Eden Prairie, here's X dollar amount for your well sealing program that you can make available to your residents. And we see how effective that is with our water efficiency grant program. Can we use that model for initiatives like this? You'd be okay with getting $10 million from the state to do something like that?
I'll
Or
defer
whatever
to
the
my
dollar
manager
amount
who
is?
has to manage our capacity. We have we've come to this committee too and talked a little bit about the water supply planning, the Metropolitan Area Water Supply Plan that is being updated as part of the water policy plan. And one piece of that work is engaging local communities and water supply stakeholders in the different subregions across the metropolitan area. So that's kicking off, and we're going to be doing some very intense conversations this fall. One of the questions that we are asking is, what are the challenges that you're wrestling with, and what resources, what tools, what information would be most helpful to you in your part of the metro with what you're wrestling with? And so asking them what kind of programs would be most valuable to them and doable for them is something that we will do and bring back to you. Knowing if this is a policy area and if you as a committee and as the council wants to have strong policy to help support protecting source water areas, then we can work with locals to come up with some good project proposals and program proposals that are going to meet our needs and serve them and be implementable. So I think that's where I'd like to see that conversation go.
Yeah, and then, Mr. Chair, I'll just add on that, we also have to be cognizant that there are multiple agencies that do come into play within this world. And so I want to ensure that we are best spending our money on programs that aren't duplicating efforts that other agencies are running. That being said, perhaps there is an opportunity for us to help bolster a program and help our partners either with messaging or making sure that we're getting the right connections. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity within this area, and thinking about wellhead protection. It's just making sure that we are working in step with partners and not stepping on partners.
Yeah, if the Department of Health already has a grant program, maybe we just double the money that's in there already, or, whatever the solution is.
If they're listening,
If we
they
could
might
do
hold
that, yeah, we can do that, a snap of our fingers. Or promote it, or, just in any way that we can make it successful. I'm curious about our facilities, the recommendation for our own facilities, number 4. And I have a sneaky suspicion that this recommendation is tied into our own climate action plan, that probably both of you had a big part of. I'm curious, when you think about projects, what comes to mind? Are you talking about going away from turf grass and more native landscapes, holding the water instead of just sending it on its way as quickly as you possibly can? What sort of projects come to mind?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you for this question. I think there's a lot of different technologies that we could employ within our facilities that the council currently holds. To your examples, it could be, I say as simple, but I'm also trying to regrow my front yard, so I know it's not as simple as just converting to native plants. So that could be one option, and water storage is going to be something as we are having a changing climate. The part that I want to make sure that we connect with our partners in transit, and they are aware of this, but it's just also making sure that where we have more of those industrial locations, whether it's a bus garage or our treatment plants, like we are making sure that if there is any stormwater management, that we really are doing that stormwater management in mind with the fact that if that stormwater does infiltrate and if it's carrying pollution, like we want to prevent that pollution from getting into our waters. And so it's just making sure that we are best using the facilities that we have in new ways that perhaps can help further this process of safeguarding our water resources. And so I think our Empire treatment plant is a really great example of how some insight and foresight in that design helped us develop a lot of stormwater treatment trains that helps us infiltrate water on site, and so it doesn't actually run off into the Vermilion. I'm excited to see where the new Hastings plant designs end up, because I think there is a lot of opportunity within Hastings and then also future facilities, and that's within environmental services. I'm sure it's a lot of other opportunities in the other areas where the council is touching.
Any questions? Yeah, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to commend you for your very tactful answer about us creating a program for new grants. This issue it's a statewide issue. I mean, it's an everywhere issue, and there's more value in having state agencies do that work so that we can protect the entire landscape and not just the metro area, not to mention that anytime we spend money on something like that, we have to go beg the legislature first, since we have a very small general fund and no dedicated funding for that kind of work other than what we ask for. But yeah, any work that, I mean, it falls under that collaborating with the state agencies to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And also, I had a conversation with a farmer a few weeks ago at an event, and he said, for some of these things, there are so many programs that nobody can keep track of what they are. So helping all of those different players sort of consolidate their work and make it easier to understand and easier to apply for would be better than making another program.
One example of that, I just wanted to, you should all be aware, because this is a great project, in the, Chair, council member, in the Dakota County area, in the Hastings drinking water supply management area. It's very agricultural. And so recently, the Department of Agriculture has started up some programming to help work with farmers to try and reduce some of the nitrate loading in that area. And so that's a new approach that they're taking. And there's connections to land use planning, big implications for water supply in the metropolitan area. And so watching how that program evolves is going to be very helpful, I think, to helping us think about how we want to work with landowners in other parts of the metro as well.
Other comments, questions?
All right, we've got a couple more slides.
Oh, yeah, all right.
Then we'll let Sam talk. And so that's it. We have come to the point in which we get to plan for current and future water needs, and this is very exciting. I'm excited to be stepping into this space with you all. Throughout all of the different topic areas, you have heard staff like Lanya, like Maureen, like others who came, and many of the same threads were apparent in all those different topics. For sure, we talked about the environment. For sure, we talked about some social connections. And for sure, we talked about some of the economic impacts of considering water within the metro. And if you start overlaying those three spheres of where we are starting to look at how water impacts ourselves, our systems, and our residents, you can see that the way forward of keeping all of those things in mind is to make sure that we are having sustainable waters going forward for the future. And so in order to have sustainable water, we do require a couple of aspects of it. We need to make sure that that water is available. And so that's a combination of balancing when that water comes from precipitation and in our sources, what that demand is from our residential and industrial needs, and what that quality is of that water. We also have to make sure that that water is accessible. And from a supply standpoint, that means perhaps that resident's well goes deep enough so that it accesses the aquifer. But it also is a little bit more broader, because if we have lakes in the urban area that aren't clean enough to swim in, that water is now not accessible for recreational needs. And so keeping that in mind as well as we're having these conversations. And then lastly, we need to make sure that the water that hopefully is available and hopefully is accessible can match what its use would be, because we can have water that is available and accessible, but that quality could preclude the use that people want to use it for. And so we have to balance these three areas as we're considering water sustainability into the future. And unfortunately, it's not easy. We can't just silo. You saw this image a while back. I'm going to bring it back. We can't silo where water falls and how it gets processed and transported and used. It is a messy system that is interwoven and at times complex and confusing, especially because I know when I was in grade school, I learned about the water cycle, and we never talked about wastewater treatment plants when we talked about that water cycle. And so thinking about the ways that we are thinking about both the natural cycle, the built cycle, and how we can overlay them to produce benefits for ourselves and our region is going to be key. But what I would like to offer is that from that complexity, we can break it down to a simple framework that can help ground us into the work that we're going to be thinking about as we approach our policy questions. We need to think about our water sources. We need to think about our users that are using the water, how they want to use the water, and how are we going to return that water to the environment. And it's a pretty simple circle if you look at it just on its own. And hopefully at this point, you know it's not this simple, because I've been talking to you for many months about different areas. And so laying on the different issues that we have brought up, and unfortunately, well, maybe fortunately for you, we haven't actually talked about all of the water issues that are currently pressing. We brought the ones that we thought were the most important as we're looking towards 2050. And so it gets a little bit more complicated as these issues are pressing on that simple framework. But that's going to be the question or the job that we have in front of us, is how do we deal with this somewhat simple framework, but very complicated issues that are putting pressure on it. And the hope is that in the end, we can figure it out and we can make sure that we do have sustainable waters now and for the future. And so, how to plan. This is the Jen Kostrzewski plan of how to plan for sustainable waters. The first part, and again, we're doing it now, I'm excited to continue doing it with you, is to think broadly over the long term. We have to seek to understand our water systems, both the built and the natural, and how they overlap and provide benefits for us and for ecosystems within the region. We need to collect data and information and activate that as knowledge. And that includes technology, human behavior, conservation, reuse, and that next cool new thing that we're going to come up with between now and 2050. We're going to have to develop policies and practices and get ready. That's coming. That's what we're going to do. So we're at step 3. And then we're going to pass a plan and count on our local partners to start implementing and investing in the region so that hopefully all of that local action can add up to regional impacts. And we can start comparing that to the metrics that we'll have in our plans that we will have developed and hopefully start seeing success over the next 10 years. And then if I'm fortunate, hopefully I will be here for that next 10-year process to rinse and repeat and start all over again. So I'm asking you to come with me on this process. It's going to be exciting, and I promise we won't always be here. We'll be workshopping in small little groups and having some fun over in 1A. And with that, thank you very much.
Thanks to both of you. Another excellent presentation and conversation. Excellent job. Jen, you were talking about the silos, and I was reminded of something I learned in Milwaukee last summer, which is that which has stuck with me, which is like water doesn't know what water is, meaning like we call it wastewater. We're the ones that call it surface water. We're the ones that call it groundwater, but water just thinks it's water.
That's right.
And it doesn't know if it's part of a Diet Coke can or an industrial process or sitting in the middle of the Mississippi River or the Pacific Ocean. It's all integrated, and you don't learn that in third grade. You know, you learn that it goes up and that it comes back down. So, yeah, thanks for the reminder there.
Yes, Mr. Chair, anytime.
Great job. And with that, takes us to the end of our agenda, I do believe. General Manager.
Well, just one quick item. Lisa is under the weather, so I'm filling in, Sam Paskey filling in for her, and wishing her well soon so she can return. And I think it's worth highlighting the approach we just heard, which is a little new, of developing a rich body of knowledge and material and highlighting issues and maybe even some of the strengths we have in the region as a preparation for the policy setting work. That's a bit new the way we did that this time, including creating a water advisory group of external stakeholders, watershed organizations, districts, wastewater practitioners, public works practitioners, water suppliers, all working together in the same virtual room most of the time to process these complex issues together. And the team and our professionals who put that approach together, it's frankly awe-inspiring to see that in execution, and I'm personally looking forward to supporting it and seeing it bear fruit, because we're on a long journey together in this region. So thank you all in the audience and those who aren't here, the dozens who've been involved. That's it for me.
Thank you very much. Well said. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good job.